Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unlearn with Bianca. If you are here for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hey everyone, I'm back, and today I am talking about why you want to stop focusing on being a nice person and instead put your energy into being a good person or a kind person. I was inspired to talk on this topic for a few reasons. First of all, I posted this quote on Instagram, which I'll share with you guys in a minute, I think last week or something, and I had so many people reply, so many people agree, and yeah, the quote really hit home. And secondly, on Self-Sourced, which is the group coaching program I'm running, we have talked a lot about people pleasing and how prevalent it is. So this episode, for the self-sourced woman listening, well done, because this is going to be a compulsory episode that I'm going to make everyone listen to. Okay, so back to that quote. The quote I shared on Instagram goes like this: "My life got better when I realized I didn't have to be nice. Nice got me used, stressed out, and disrespected. I'm not a nice person, I'm a good person, and there is a difference. You don't have to be nice to be a good person. Being good means being honest, setting boundaries, and taking care of yourself without compromising your values. Being nice may give you temporary approval, but it really earns you respect or helps you build genuine connections." This quote is everything. It is so true. It's not really something I considered the difference between being a nice person versus being a good person or a kind person. But in actual fact, there is a huge difference. So I find that we tend to use the terms kind, nice, good, all very interchangeably. At face value, they're sort of the same thing. But let's break it down a bit more because there is a distinct difference. Today, we're really going to focus on kind versus nice. So a kind person acts in the best interest of others. So their behavior is other orientated, but it is coming from a place of love, it's coming from a place of overflow, it's coming from a place of care, and it's coming without expectation. So, not expecting anything in return. Nice, on the other hand, and this is really interesting, I want you to listen in. Nice is more self-centered, because if you know someone that's overly nice, generally speaking, they're acting in a really pleasing way, and it's a way in which to get people to like them and avoid conflict. So if we think of a nice person, it's sort of like agreeable, polite, friendly, placid, all of those things that we actually value in society. But if we look at it at a deeper level, and I know this is going to be really hard to hear, there is this element of overly nice people having disowned a sense of themselves. They people please and they sacrifice themselves to the degree that it actually hurts other people. And I'll explain about this soon, but I'm really flipping this for you guys because I think sometimes we just think, nice people, yeah, that's what we want to be. Now let me break this down a bit further. Why would someone who's overly nice be a little bit selfish? And yes, I know that word selfish, for so many of us, we have this instant like, I would hate to be called that. But being overly nice is a little bit selfish, and here's why. You're saying yes and you are giving because you want approval and you want love and validation from someone outside of yourself. So you're not doing things from a place of kindness or having the capacity to do it. You're doing it because you want them to like you, or you're doing it because you want them to validate you. So you're doing it for yourself. Does that make sense? That is the difference from doing something from a place of overflow, love, care, kindness versus putting all your energy into people pleasing and being super, super nice. Okay, so where does this actually come from? When we tend to people please or be overly nice, there's a whole lot of reasons as to why that habit has developed. And I say this in most episodes, but remember, this is just a habit. It's not who you are. It's a current habit or response that is occurring for you. Often it comes down to conditioning from the past, perhaps how we were validated or how we needed to act to be loved growing up, or how we avoided pain and rejection, often growing up as well. And what's really happening at the nervous system level is that you are unconsciously soothing someone else's nervous system, so making sure that they're okay before you are soothing your own. So when someone else is happy, when someone else is okay, when someone else's needs are fulfilled, that is what brings you safety first, rather than actually tending to your own needs. Okay, so yes, at some point, people pleasing, being overly nice, it really serves us. I have been there myself. It's something that I'm still unlearning. There's always a valid reason as to why we are acting the way we do, or why we are still running certain habits and behaviors. And I mean, that's just one example of how it can be formed out earlier experiences in life, but it can also be cultural. For anyone that's traveled overseas, you will know that like different places that you go, there are completely different cultural norms in the way that people interact. For example, I was quite shocked when I went to parts of Europe, Germany, the Netherlands. They are very direct. And it really made me realize that in New Zealand, there is a lot of niceties. There's a lot of like fluff that we have learned that you don't even really notice it's a cultural thing until you step outside of your little echo chamber and realize, yeah, there's lots of habits that we learn unconsciously. Okay, so you might be listening and thinking, how do I know if I'm being an overly nice person versus a kind person? Well, I've got a list here and I'm going to share it. Ask me why. I have a very exhaustive list. Hint, yes, like I said before, I have definitely learned a lot in this area. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some of the habits, the tendencies to keep an eye out for. One, overly nice people, or nice people, are chameleons. I used to pride myself on being a chameleon, like to the point I thought it was my best trait. I always found myself really fitting into different groups of people, being able to get along with everyone. Like you could literally put me in any situation and I'd be absolutely fine. The older I've gotten, the more I've really thought about this. People that are chameleons, you can find that there's these micro changes in who you are based on who you are around. For example, you might be with some really old friends and you just unconsciously revert back to talking or gossiping about people. And then you're with another group of people and you just show a completely different side of yourself. And you're sort of blending to fit in with different people. Now, the issue around this is that on the surface, it can look really good. But underneath it, you lose the sense of self because you're fitting in and you're molding. What can happen is you start to really ask yourself, like, who am I? Like, what are my values? Because if you find yourself agreeing with a whole lot of different people on all types of different subjects and values, it can be quite disorientating when you're trying to figure out who you actually are. And I would even take it as far to say that if you are being a chameleon and molding yourself to so many different people and situations, you can actually unconsciously become quite two-faced because you're not wanting to disagree with certain people. You might be sitting on the fence with others. You might not be speaking up. And that is something that I have noticed that people with overly nice tendencies can actually do. The next one is that overly nice people are happy to go with the flow. They are low maintenance. This is one that still pops up for me. For example, the other night I was at dinner with a friend, and at the moment I am back on my healthy buzz. I'm being really healthy, and my friend suggested we share the meals, which I often do, and have a drink. And you know what? I did it. I made that choice without realizing, without pausing. I just said, yep, why not? Like, that looks good. I'm happy with that. And then afterwards I thought about it. I'm like, why did I say yes to sharing? Yes, it was a really yummy meal, but I had made a promise to myself that I was going to be really healthy and there was a healthy option that I could have just had by myself. So often this whole go with the flow thing, it's such a habitual habit that really requires us to create some space to really question, do I want to continue to do what I usually do, or do I want to actually be honest and follow my needs first? The go with the flow comes up in so many little instances in our life, and it's really one that I think a lot of women especially can relate to. That low maintenance thing as well, like it's perceived that it's better if we're low maintenance. I don't agree with that anymore. Go with the flow, low maintenance. It can definitely be a symptom of somebody who is overly nice. Next symptom of an overly nice person is resentment and passive aggressiveness. When we are overly nice and we are attending to everybody else's needs, but not really wanting to do it, or doing it out of a place of exhaustion or not having the capacity, resentment tends to build. And that can often come out in passive aggressiveness, irritability. Over time, I would say it really leads to resentment and checking out and being resentful of other people and how they tend to get their needs met, but you or we don't get our needs met. This is a huge one. If you are consistently feeling resentment and you are being passive aggressive around, especially around your closest people, that is a sign that you may be being overly nice to everyone else. We all know those people that put on that mask of being super, super, super nice outside of the home or outside of their closest people, but when they get home, they're really grumpy. There's an example. The next sign that you might be tipping towards being too nice is sneakily asserting things in covert ways. So, what do I mean by that? If we are not comfortable about setting boundaries and being clear, the subconscious mind takes over and we can assert things in really subtle ways. So rather than setting a clear boundary, it's done in like an undercover way. For example, let's say there's a man and a woman in a relationship and the man has a lot of female friends. Because the female may not want to address this up front and she might be ashamed around like a particular belief she has or a truth she has, she might assert a boundary in a really subtle and manipulative way. So it could be like, oh, I think it's really cool that you have lots of female friends, and say one thing, but then sulk about it. And her energy is completely different. And when we do this, it's because we're trying to stay nice and not look like a difficult person. But really, this is quite manipulative and it happens a lot. And I've been there myself, to be honest. It happens when we are too afraid to speak our truth, that we say one thing, but our energy and the way we act is opposing that. So that is definitely something that overly nice people do because they're too scared to assert themselves, and therefore what they say does not align with how they truly feel. And it inadvertently makes things really difficult, and it can also hurt people in the long run as well. That comes on to my next point, which is overly nice people tend to cling on for too long. And again, that is because they don't want to hurt anyone. And it's a really difficult thing to learn, that people have their own lessons to learn, that we can't really make everyone happy. When you're overly nice, you tend to avoid conflict and hurting people or clinging on to situations too long, whether it be jobs, relationships, friendships. But again, you don't necessarily want to be in the thing. You don't really want to be there. The next one, if you're being overly nice, you can really get into the habit of over-explaining or over-justifying. And this is one that, again, I'm really familiar with. It's just a waste of energy. But if you find yourself consistently having to over-explain things or over-justify things to people, that may be a symptom that you're being too nice and trying to get your point across. Next one, avoiding conflict. Okay, this is probably the biggest one of people that are really nice. They really like to avoid conflict. Their nervous system is primed, is soothed through avoiding conflict. But the reality is that we can't avoid conflict. Because when you avoid conflict, you start a war inside yourself. Yes, I'll say that again. When you avoid conflict, you start a war inside yourself. When we avoid conflict, we can unconsciously become an enabler of other people's shitty actions. When we avoid conflict, we're not facing the reality of a situation. When we avoid conflict, we can become really inauthentic because overly nice people don't want to reveal their thoughts and their feelings, their true thoughts and feelings, and they hide anything that would cause conflict. Okay? And avoiding conflict is where the resentment can start. For example, a friend might ask, "Hey, can you please come over right now and help me move all my stuff?" And you can help, but you just can't do it in that moment. But you do drop everything and you go over because you don't like conflict. That is an instance where we are putting aside our needs to jump at the needs of someone else. And over time, what can happen is you end up doing things because they're transactional. So you do things for other people, but you're also having this expectation that people will do things back. And when they don't, that is where the resentment comes in. Avoiding conflict is a big one. Avoiding conflict in relationships, avoiding conflict in friendships. And as someone who has also worked on that a lot, I really think we have to build our muscle around conflict and build that capacity in really small doses, because I get it. It can be really hard. Okay, 2 more. Overly nice people can become martyrs, whether self-proclaimed or just seen as a martyr by everyone else. Savior vibes, like the person that comes to save the day. How do you know if you're doing that? Well, you're committing to things that you don't want to do, even without being asked to do them. You are offering advice even when no one asked. You feel responsibility for everyone else's choices. And you feel like everything's going to fall apart if you are not in the picture, right? Again, this is something that appears to be like a really good behavior and a good habit, and it's really valued. We can get this temporary high of self-esteem when people rely on us as humans. But then there is this dread afterwards because it's that over responsibility. And why do we do this? Become saviors. Why do we try and save people from choices, even though we know it's their own life? Why do we step in and offer advice when it wasn't asked for? Why do we commit even when we don't have the time or energy? Again, it's that preventing pain from watching others go through pain. We don't want to feel the guilt. And at some part of this habit, we are maintaining this emotional connection. But I really want to stress, if this pattern continues, your identity becomes built around helping other people when your needs are not actually being met. And again, in a way, it's slightly self-centered because we can get into this mindset where it's like we think we are the only answer to someone else's problems. It feels emotionally good. There is an element of that when we are needed, but it's not sustainable. Finally, the last one of being overly nice, you probably know what's coming because I talk about this in most of my episodes. Being overly nice, people pleasing, can result in chronic symptoms. I did a post on Instagram a few weeks ago saying that self-sacrificing is making women sick. And yes, I stand by that. And yes, I know there's so many complexities, and I know that society is not set up for people to thrive. However, if we are being overly nice, we avoid conflict, we're people pleasing, we are molding ourselves to fit in, all these things I've talked about, you are draining. Imagine you've got a bucket of energy, of resources at the physical level, right? If you're doing all of that, you are draining or putting holes in your bucket and draining all this energy. This energy is going outward. I really want you to think about all this energy is dispersed outward and none of it is going into you. So an example for me actually, which I definitely think people pleasing and some of these things were the reason as to why my nervous system became dysregulated, later got chronic pain, the rest of it. One thing now that I do is if I get a sore throat, I don't tend to experience sickness very often, but let's say colds and flus. If I get a sore throat, rather than put that on, just must be going around, which to a degree it could be true, I also take some influence and personal responsibility. And I look and do an audit at where my energy is going. Because knowing myself and knowing that over responsibility can be like one of my weak points, I look at where I'm overcommitting when I should be saying no. I look at where I'm not being honest with other people. And I look at where I am overworking. And once I patch up some of those things, once I start setting boundaries again, once I pour into myself, I find that things start to heal really quickly in my body. So I see that when our immune system is down, it can also be because our energy is so dispersed everywhere else other than going into ourselves. So that's just another gentle reminder. But yes, being overly nice can result in chronic symptoms, and I could talk for ages on this. Another reason why is because you're not expressing anger. I won't get into this in this episode, but that is just a symptom. So what can we do? If you've noticed that you're doing a few of the things I've just talked over, well done for noticing. You're not alone. What can you actually do about it? First thing, doing some belief work, and that might be with a coach like myself or someone else, but someone who can really help point out your blind spots and work with the subconscious mind. A space where you can start expressing how you feel and unpacking some of the habitual experiences that you're going through or habitual thought patterns that you're going through, so that you can really track what beliefs you're operating from, perhaps where these beliefs come from, and where to start to shift these. A lot of the time we really are just running on autopilot, and sometimes we just need that guidance and that support to make changes. The next thing is to sort your values and look at your priorities at this point in your life. And I say at this point because I believe that our values and our priorities can really change depending on what season we're in. But something that I want you to remember is that you can't say what you want to say no to unless you know what you want to say yes to. For example, if we have really clear priorities and values, we can keep our eye on the prize, keep our focus on that, and it becomes easier to say no to other things that are not that. So your priorities in this season might be on making money, might be on exercise, it might be on children, it might be on your partner, it might be on a career. An exercise I did recently is because I was feeling a bit all over the show, I picked 3. And then I really started to look at the offers that were coming into my life, how I was spending my time and energy throughout the week. And I started to use that as a compass, those 3 priorities, so I could say no because I had my focus on those 3 things. And that really helped. So remember that when you take care of yourself and your own happiness, everything else will become easier. Make a commitment to yourself and say yes to things that are in alignment with that priority list, and say no to things that do not fall within those top priorities. When I experience a feeling of overwhelm, another thing that I do is just make a list of everything that I want to say no to. And sometimes it's really confronting to do this exercise, but it can be just really small things. It might be cancelling a gym membership. It might be cancelling a date. It might be ending a project. It might be, I don't know, setting a boundary with a friend, a loving boundary, of course. But thinking about all these energy leaks and things that we've said yes to when actually we mean no. And this is sort of coming into boundary setting. But one thing I'd recommend is take the path of least resistance, meaning if you feel like it's really hard to have a big in-person conversation, perhaps there is just a text message you could draft. Perhaps you could end an email more concisely rather than putting all the niceties in. All these little things can really help us build confidence with setting boundaries. And I will say, chances after you've set a boundary or you've cancelled or you've said no, there will be discomfort. And at that point, often we want to run, we want to go back on our word. But I want you to know that that discomfort of saying yes to yourself and saying no to something else, that's completely normal. And I think it's really healthy just to sit with that feeling that comes up, knowing that it will pass, and just knowing that you're helping yourself build this capacity to setting flexible boundaries. Another thing, if you are setting boundaries, is compliment the other person and explain your choice based on how you feel. For example, rather than just saying, I can't come to that event this weekend, you could say something like, that event sounds really incredible, but at the moment I'm feeling really stressed due to blah, 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 and I won't be making it this weekend. By doing it that way, it's not about the person or the event that you're saying no to. You're bringing it back to your own feelings and where you're currently at, and you're giving them some validation before you set the boundary. That's something to think about, and something, again, that when you start doing becomes easier and easier, and you're building your capacity to sit with the discomfort of boundaries. A few more things that can really help us become a kind person, not an overly nice person. Allow people to form opinions of you. You don't agree with everyone's opinions, and therefore it's just knowing that other people won't always like you. Other people won't always agree with you either. And it's something to really keep in the back of your mind. And that means that when you meet new people, rather than shapeshift and become a chameleon, you can just keep that in mind. I don't have to impress everyone. I can stand true in my word. I don't have to go out of my way to use all my energy to try and impress or to please. Really focusing on allowing people to form opinions of you, but knowing that ultimately how you stand in your truth is what matters the most. The next one is practicing self-care and really treating yourself like you would someone that you love. Doing the small things, whether it be moving every day, really focusing on a nourishing diet, getting out in the sun. Do something nice for yourself. You know, when we do all this stuff, when we prioritize our health and we prioritize ourselves, we are pouring from that full cup. And I know everybody knows this, and I know I've said this on multiple podcasts, but these don't have to be big things. These can just be the really basic things. Acknowledging when we're really, really tired and we need to ask for support. All these things are commitments to ourselves, and I think the more we can practice coming back and tuning into our own needs, the more we recognize when we need to give to ourselves and fill up our cup. And it becomes easier to notice when you're giving from an empty cup. Finally, the last thing, and I would argue the hardest thing for people that are overly nice, confront things head on. Okay, confront things head on. I know it takes time. I know it takes energy. I know it's uncomfortable. But we can start by even the little things. I'm trying to think of something little. An example might be if you've been really meaning to have that conversation with your manager or your boss, it's just been on the back burner and you haven't wanted to speak up. Perhaps that is a goal you can have, to actually sit down, to send that email, whatever it is, to speak to that person. Get used to confronting things so you can train your brain to take bold action, to sit with the discomfort. And then after that, you're training it and you're conditioning it to get in touch with that feeling of relief. That relief that comes once we've really addressed something that has been sitting there that we haven't been wanting to face. And the more we can start doing that and really acknowledging and sitting with that feeling of relief and getting used to that feeling, I personally think the easier it becomes to confront difficult things as our brain and our nervous system gets conditioned to that feeling and that response. And hey, I'm saying this again from a place of very much on this journey, but these are things that have really helped me. And I hope just by going into this conversation today that it's helped some of you guys who are self-proclaimed people pleasers, self-proclaimed nice people. Remember that people treat you how you treat yourself. People expect things from you based on what you are willing to give. And people will keep treating you as the same person. They'll keep having the same expectations until you change and you decide where you want to put your energy. Okay, I hope today's episode was helpful. My wish is that we can all start to move from this place of overflow, from kindness, from love, and not sacrifice ourselves or neglect our needs in the process. We are all a work in progress, and I'm super proud of you if you are on this journey. And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you are on this journey. As always, please follow. I know there's so many followers now, and my ratings are not reflecting that. So if you haven't already gone on and rated this podcast, please do. Please share it. It really helps me, and I'm really enjoying this process as well. The more traction it gets, the more inspired I am, and appreciate you listening. Have a beautiful week, and I look forward to the next episode.